If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Group F in this summer's European Championships is going to be an absolute bloodbath. A couple days ago, we got our first taste of what Group F would offer us. Portugal beat Hungary 3-0, and in a battle of the two most recent World Cup winners, France just barely edged Germany 1-0 in a low-scoring but still exciting and star-studded affair. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the headline match from Matchday 1 of Euro 2020 and what exactly made France such a tough nut to crack. Before we get into the analysis though, if you're new to the channel, well, first of all, welcome, you're in the right place. But also, if this tactical breakdown, this tactical analysis is something you find interesting or fascinating, please at least consider hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video again. I've got plenty more Euro 2020 and plenty more Copa America videos on the way. Some will be this tactical breakdown, some will be just a more bird's eye analysis, but you're not going to want to miss any of it. So first, let's take a look at what shapes both nations played in. France came out in a shape that I think a lot of us expected them to play in. It was a 4-4-2 with the midfield diamond, Lloris in goal, a back four of Lucas Hernandez, Raphael Varane, Kimpembe, Benjamin Pavard. That was never in question. It was always going to be that back four. And then in midfield, we saw Kante, Pogba, Antoine Griezmann, and Adrien Rabiot. That was the one name, if you think about my France preview from a few days ago. Rabiot was the one place in this French team that we didn't know who that could have been. It could have been Rabiot, could have been Corentin Tolisso, could have been Moussa Sissoko. Didier Deschamps chose Adrien Rabiot. We also saw that two-striker pairing of Karim Benzema and Kylian Mbappe. Really happy to see Karim Benzema fully recovered and able to start on Matchday 1. Germany did something a little bit different. Germany came out in a 3-4-2-1. I don't think that's what a lot of people expected them to play in. Back three, well, first of all, Neuer in goal. Obviously, he's Germany's clear-cut number one when he's fully fit. A back three of Antonio Rüdiger, Mats Hummels, Matthias Ginter at Borussia Mönchengladbach. And then two wing-backs of Robin Gosens and Joshua Kimmich. We'll talk about Kimmich a little bit later because that decision confused me a little bit. A midfield two of Toni Kroos and İlkay Gundogan, and then an attacking three of Kai Havertz, Thomas Muller, and Serge Gnabry, playing in that, not out-and-out striker, but that false nine kind of floater role. Now, at least the way that I see this match, and the way that the two sides came out in terms of their personnel, France were handed a gift before the ball even kicked off, and that is because Joachim Löw chose to use Joshua Kimmich at right wing back. Kimmich is this side's best midfielder. I don't think that's a particularly bold take, and so I was a bit confused why he was deployed at that spot. And I do understand that Germany were looking to use three center backs to match up with the pace of and the unpredictability of the Benzema, Griezmann, Mbappe attack. But I really don't think Joshua Kimmich is the one who should have lost out on his place in midfield, because like I said, I think he's the best of the three between him, Toni Kroos, and İlkay Gundogan. Kimmich is a player who you want at the heart of everything, and then you plan around him. That's at least the way that I see this Germany squad. Yes, he's probably the best deployed at right wing back than any of the other two options. Then, of course, Germany had Lucas Klostermann and Marcel Halstenberg on the bench that they could have used there as well. I think even with France's quick attack, Germany would have been better served in all areas of the pitch if they chose to stick with a back four and use Joshua Kimmich as a defensive midfielder. You can still play with Gosens at left back if you want, or you can go with Halstenberg and Klostermann at the fullbacks, and then any two of Ginter, Rüdiger, or Hummels in that center back pairing. Kimmich can, in possession or out of possession, can tuck into the back line, turn it into a back three anyway, if that's what you want to do with him. But Joshua Kimmich, I thought the decision to play him wide was I understood the logic that Joachim Löw used, but I really disagreed with it. I thought Joshua Kimmich should have been the first player in that German midfield. So now let's talk about what France did tactically to win this match. I've got 5 things in possession, 5 things out of possession, and then I've got my man of the match as well. The first thing I want to talk about that France did in possession of the ball when they had it at their feet was the role that Antoine Griezmann played, because I think he was massively important in the way that France built their attack and progressed the ball into the final third, but he's not getting a whole lot of attention and recognition for it. Maybe understandably so, because Griezmann is so good when France are in that final third and they are looking to work the ball closer to goal. But in the build-up of things, when France had just won the ball back, when it was with somebody in the back four, when it was with maybe N'Golo Kante, we saw Griezmann in that number 10 role drop really, really deep to receive. Obviously a very skilled dribbler, tough to take the ball off his foot. And so he would drop deep. Specifically, he would drop deep often to the right side, where we saw Benjamin Pavard playing. Pogba too was occupying that space. Then he linked up with Griezmann very, very well. Antoine Griezmann was hugely important in France, keeping the ball and progressing the ball up the pitch. And one of the biggest reasons why was because when he did drop deep to receive the ball from N'Golo Kante or one of the center backs or whoever, he wasn't looking to play the ball horizontally. He immediately turned around and looked for somebody ahead of him that he could play through or play in on goal or whatever. That's your role as a number 10 when you're playing in that advanced midfield position tucked in between the two strikers. That's what your job is, but Griezmann did that not just in the final third, but in the build-up and the controlling play as well. He was doing that everywhere on the pitch. Another player whose role was hugely important, who this should not come as a huge shock, but I want to touch on anyway, is the presence of N'Golo Kante in this France midfield. We know how good he is for Chelsea. He's a defensive midfielder receiving Ballon d'Or shots. I think that shows you just enough about how talented N'Golo Kante is in midfield. But his ability to do everything himself defensively. Taylor Twellman on the broadcast called him a one-man wrecking crew. And that's true. That's what N'Golo Kante is. And he wins the ball back so well. He's got a fantastic passing range, impossible to dispossess. And him being there, his presence allowed Paul Pogba, who was a lot of people's man of the match, to get forward, get into those creative positions, put balls into the box. The first goal was entirely thanks to a brilliant Pogba ball that switched play to Lucas Hernandez in the penalty area. And that's entirely the reason why he can get into those positions is because N'Golo Kante is taking all of the defensive responsibility, and he's doing it perfectly fine. Pogba doesn't get that freedom at Manchester United when it's Scott McTominay or Fred. He gets that with N'Golo Kante, and that's why Kante is so important in this French team. Another thing that we knew about this France squad, but didn't really see it on full display until this match, was just how fluid they are in possession. You can take a look at the heat maps of France's three attacking players, Antoine Griezmann, Karim Benzema, and Kylian Mbappe, and you can see just how everywhere they all were. Kylian Mbappe, for the most part, liked to stay on that left side, but you can see he got centrally as well, and Griezmann and Benzema just ran wherever. And you might look at that and think, oh, that's a relatively poor game plan. Everyone should know their role and you should keep your shape. But with this French attack, it works because all three players are just so completely talented anywhere on the pitch that they can occupy those spaces. And what it does is it gives the German defense, and it really gave the German defense fits because they didn't know who to pick up, how to anticipate runs. Karim Benzema was playing centrally, but he was playing wide when the ball was wide. Antoine Griezmann, as we talked about, was playing centrally as number 10, but when the ball was on one of the flanks, he was dropping deep to receive. So that made France's attack so unpredictable, so difficult to defend against for Germany, for a German back line that actually, for as good as it was, and I thought it was all right actually, not a whole lot of pace in it. And that's what France was able to exploit, specifically on the counter, which we'll get into now. When France were presented with a counter-attacking opportunity, they took it. I mean, they were lightning quick when given that chance to win the ball back and instantly spring Kylian Mbappe or Karim Benzema on the counterattack. We'll talk a little bit about why they were presented with so many of these opportunities a little bit later when we discuss France out of possession. But strictly in possession, I mean, the French counterattack was so strong. It was so quick, and it's because of the pace of Kylian Mbappe. Every time France won the ball back in their defensive third, you were immediately, if you were watching this match, you were immediately looking, where's Mbappe? Where's Benzema? Because they, and again, we'll talk about this in a little bit in the out of possession segment, but Mbappe and Benzema were the only two players in this French shape who weren't really defending a whole lot, and it was because they were sitting up on the center backs, pinning them back, but also trying to get a step when France won the ball back. Some really skilled ball-playing midfielders with N'Golo Kante, Rabiot, and Paul Pogba, so not difficult to pick out a run in behind if Kylian Mbappe is streaking in behind Matthias Ginter, who, by the way, he gave fits. And that's actually how they got their second goal, which was later ruled out, which was such a shame because it was the move itself, the counter-attacking move, was textbook. It was so clinical. It was France sitting a bit deep, Pogba wins the ball back, instantly plays in Kylian Mbappe behind, plays across for Karim Benzema. Benzema scores. Would have been his first goal for France in 6 years. Will it ever come? Who knows? Maybe Karim Benzema will never score for Les Bleus again. But That's how they got their second goal. It was on a counter-attacking move, a clinical counter-attacking move. It got ruled out, but it's still worth mentioning because that's what their game plan was all match. Of course, didn't get a goal from it. The only goal in this match was a Matsuma's own goal. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this French counterattack had Germany doing quite a bit of thinking. Last thing we'll talk about when we discuss France in possession was just how quick they were at moving off the ball. There were several moments in this match where I watched France win the ball back, turned away from my screen for 3 or 4 seconds, looked back at the TV, and France have the ball in Germany's third zone. And it's entirely because France, they play with this fluidity that we discussed in talking about their attack, but it's really the team as a whole. They all are moving off the ball, and that gives Germany nightmares to defend because do you mark the runner? Do you stay in your zone? What do you do? But also, it makes it so quick. It makes it so bang, bang, bang. One-touch passing consistently from the back four to that midfield diamond up to Kylian Mbappe and Karim Benzema in the final third. Consistently. I mean, they consistently just cut through Germany like a hot knife through butter. I mean, it was beautiful watching France build up play this quickly, and it's because they're so good at playing the ball, of course, and that's why they're so difficult to beat, but also because everybody was moving off the ball. They were finding space to run into, specifically when the ball did get into the final third, and we were then looking at Antoine Griezmann, Kylian Mbappe, and Karim Benzema. Those are 3 players who can find space anywhere, and they also just have this telepathic connection. They know where the other 2 are at any given moment. And that's what made France so difficult to slow down in the transition, because they were so quick, constantly moving, constantly finding players, one-touch passing. Say what you want about Germany, but that's an impressive feat, especially in match day 1 of a European Championships. So out of possession, France's tactics, their game plan was, I think, what a lot of us expected it to be, especially early in this competition. They were content with sitting back and inviting pressure and bringing Germany onto them a little bit. Not that they were sitting and parking the bus and playing in their defensive third for 70% of this match, but they didn't press high up the pitch. They stayed disciplined. They stayed in their shape, and they knew their roles. They did this for a number of reasons, and it really, really worked against Germany. The first reason is that the German attackers, at least the ones that started, and that was, again, Serge Gnabry, Kai Havertz, and Thomas Muller, they thrive. Well, I shouldn't say it. Well, I mean, it is true. They do thrive in space. They're fantastic attacking players, and they are all unique, to be fair, in their own right. But one thing that they do all have in common is that they love to operate in space. They love to find space in behind, to use their pace, especially the subs like Timo Werner and Lloris. And so France sat deep, they stayed compact, they limited the space, both behind the defense and in those half spaces where specifically Thomas Muller and Kai Havertz love to operate in. Essentially, it forced Germany's attack to play and to create and to link while France's defenders were in front of them. And while they are talented enough, and they were talented enough to be fair, to create a handful of chances, it's not where they do their best work. And France did well to identify that and to limit the space to force German attackers to do something else. And what that 4-4-2 low block also did was it congested the center of the pitch. It put a lot of bodies in that middle channel, and it forced Germany to play the ball wide. There were moments in this match where Germany tried to play through the middle. They tried to play by getting around Pogba and N'Golo Kante and the 2 French center backs. But France consistently made it very, very difficult, and more often than not, the chances that Germany created were forced to come from the flanks, because when Germany tried to play through the middle, and specifically when they tried to play on the ground, France dealt with it perfectly fine. That's entirely because of that low block, that 4-4-2, and just having physical midfielders in the middle of the park in Paul Pogba and N'Golo Kante. Varane and Kimpembe were fantastic, a little bit more on them later. But France's game plan against Germany was to congest the middle of the park, sit back a little bit, force the ball wide. Once the ball did go wide to Robin Gosens or Joshua Kimmich, if he was still over on that right flank, that's when France would press, try to win the ball back. And then, of course, as we mentioned, once they won the ball back, they would look for Kylian Mbappe or Karim Benzema on the counter, rinse, wash, repeat, frustrate Germany, create chances on the other end. That was France's game plan out of possession. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'll mention it anyway because it does have implications in their out of possession tactics as well. Kylian Mbappe and Karim Benzema didn't do a whole lot of defensive work. They didn't have a whole lot of defensive responsibility because they were instructed with being up and sitting with Antonio Rüdiger and Mats Hummels and Matthias Ginter, because when French players like Paul Pogba or Rabiot or N'Golo Kante won the ball back, they're all so good at picking out a pass, especially in open field, that as soon as France won the ball back, you saw Mbappe and Benzema streaking forward and looking for that ball, that dangerous pinpoint counterattack that we saw France use, and that we did see them score a goal from, but it was later ruled out through an offside call. It was really effective. And another reason why France's counterattack worked so well was because Germany played with those two wingbacks, and Joshua Kimmich on the right and Robin Gosens on the left. When Germany were in possession, specifically when Germany were in the attacking third, those players were high up the pitch. They were creating. I mean, Joshua Kimmich certainly is not a player that you want sitting on a back line when your team is looking to create. You want that man in the middle of things. You want that man creating. That's why I thought he should have been playing in the center of midfield. Gosens is similar. That's the role that Robin Gosens plays at Atalanta. He gets up the pitch and he's fine defensively, but the reason why he's in this German team is to attack and to create from that left flank. So it was still a numerical advantage for Germany defensively. It was France's two attacking players versus Germany's three center backs. But France's two attacking players are two of the finest attacking players on the planet in Kylian Mbappe and Karim Benzema. So while there was a numerical advantage, Didier Deschamps was completely okay with betting on his guys against a back three of Germany that, you know, had question marks. It's not as strong as it once was. There was a numerical disadvantage for France, but that very clearly didn't affect them a whole lot. When France did choose to press, whether it was wide or in the central channels when Germany were starting to crack through, the icing on the cake that made things so frustrating for Germany when they were trying to build was that France were this perfect combination of disciplined in keeping their shape, but relentless in trying to win the ball back. There are several moments when we see, whether it's Toni Kroos or a player like Kai Havertz, get through that midfield four, staring at the center backs, and he loses the ball with France still staying in that 4-4-2 because they would swarm you. That they all knew where their zones were. They knew not to be dragged out of position, but when that ball entered their zone, I mean, it was relentless pressure, and it made things impossible for Germany, specifically in those half spaces. That's why they were forced to spray the ball wide so often, is because even if they did, crack the French defense a little bit, if they did crack that 4-4-2 low block just a tad, France were relentless enough but disciplined enough to win the ball back and to give German players as little amount of time as possible. Specifically the center back, specifically Raphael Varane and Presnel Kimpembe, but also, N'Golo Kante played a massive role in this. Even Antoine Griezmann was a player who we saw with a fair bit of defensive responsibility, which is obviously not something that he gets overly lauded for at Barcelona, but in this French side, he seems to do it just fine. They're so quick to the ball, but they stay organized. And it's most sides, when they're playing in a low block, are one or the other. They're either very, very organized and very, very structured, or they see the ball, they chase the ball, and they hope to win the ball back before the other team can expose some of the space that they've created. France do both, and it really, really is a fascinating thing to watch. Several players who deserve man of the match honors, I think, for France, and we mentioned Paul Pogba as one of them, the chief creator for France against Germany. Several moments that, in typical Paul Pogba for the national team fashion, you watch and just your jaw hits the floor. But I'm going to go a different route. I think my man of the match is going to be Raphael Varane. Defensively, what he did for France against Germany was fantastic. When Germany did crack through this French low block, there were 4 or 5 times when it was Raphael Varane to the rescue, specifically in the first half. I thought he was fantastic in the first half of this match. The vocal leader of this French defense, their best defender, and he played that role extremely well. Like we said, I mean, France were inviting pressure. They were asking Germany to come at them. And if you don't have a really, really strong center back pairing, and more specifically, if you don't have one really, really talented, strong physical center back, that tactic can very easily go down the toilet. Raphael Varane is that center back. He is that player for France. He is arguably the biggest reason why France can play in that 4-4-2 low block and have it work. Raphael Varane was actually statistically damn near perfect. You can take a look at his numbers on the screen. Perfect in duels, perfect in completing his dribbles, which, for a center back doesn't matter, but for this argument, we'll talk about it because it's worth discussing. Perfect in tackles attempted, perfect in aerial duels. I mean, Varane was so crucial to the way France played out of possession. Varane did everything he possibly could have for France in this match against Germany. again, several players who could have won man of the match. I thought Pogba, Rabiot was very good as well, Edger Rabiot. But when I look at what Raphael Varane contributed to France out of possession, I think he's the biggest reason why that 4-4-2 low block worked in the first place. Because again, it's not an easy thing to pull off if you don't have that one sentinel in your back line who can be physical, can win balls in the air, and can keep the ball at his feet. That's what Raphael Varane was. That's why Germany were held off the score sheet despite creating more expected goals, and that's why he's my man of the match. So that will do it for my analysis on France versus Germany in match day 1. Again, a fantastic match. It was a chess match, I think, between these two sides and the way that they adjusted tactically to each other. Let me know what you think in the comments, if you agree, if you disagree, if you think that I sold Germany a little bit short maybe, if you think that France were even better than I may have portrayed, if there's anything you noticed in this match that I didn't mention, drop that all in the comments below. Also, if you like what you saw and you're new here again, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. I'm hoping to come out within the next couple of days on a video of breaking down one player who's caught the eye of certainly myself, but I think a lot of people who are watching this Euro 2020. If you've been watching the tournament as closely as I have, you might have a couple names in the back of your head. I'm hoping to come out with a player analysis video on him in the coming days, so keep an eye out for that. Also, please be sure to follow me on Twitter at WillFowler5. Follow London's Finest on Twitter at London's Finest QU. London's Finest is just the show that me and two of my buddies do every single Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. in the UK, where we hop on a Zoom call, talk about the biggest stories in the world of European and international football, and then we put it on Twitter and Periscope. So always a good time. I will link both of those Twitter accounts in the description below. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.